My father said my birth was an accident, literally. He had intended to perform composing a poem within 7 steps before my mother went into labor, but just as he took his 3rd step, an embroidered shoe flew out of the delivery room, hitting his official hat with pinpoint accuracy. I was born amid this ouch, and it said my crying shook 3 pounds of dust off the roof beam. The midwife later told everyone, Lord Jiang received his daughter like receiving an imperial decree. Kneeling and holding her out with both hands, at the age of 15, I became the top troublemaker among the capital's spoiled elite. One day, I'd take the young master of the Minister of Rights to a gambling den to cheat. The next, I'd trick the eldest daughter of General Zhenyuan into dressing as a man to visit a brothel. My most glorious achievement was at a poetry gathering, where I got half the Hanlin Academy drunk with 3 jars of pear blossom white. Causing a mass sick leave at the next morning's court session, my father chased me for 3 blocks with a cane. Jiang Yuan, why can't you be more like Miss Lin next door? I crouched on the eaves, munching on an apple. She was just asking to borrow my storybook yesterday. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. The turning point happened on an auspicious day. I was listening to storytelling at the tea house. Just at the exciting part where the female top scholar was answering the Emperor's questions in the Golden Hall, when someone at the next table suddenly sneered, "For women, lack of talent is a virtue." I turned and saw a foppish young master. "Brother," I grinned and leaned in, "do you know why a woman without talent is virtuous?" He stroked his beard smugly. "Naturally, it's because of useless men like you." I smacked the peanut shell onto his face. "Who need this pitiful self-esteem?" That evening, I declared I would take the imperial examination to become the top scholar. My father's tea sprayed 3 feet away. "You can't even recite their admonitions for women in full. I'm supposed to recite their analects." I crossed my legs. The preparation process was utter chaos. I replaced all my cosmetics with ink sticks, and the maids cried, saying the young miss now smelled of ink. My old troublemaker friends took turns trying to persuade me. "Yuan, the gambling house just got a new set of white jade dice." "Not going." I didn't even look up. I have to memorize my texts. The most outrageous was that young master who accused me of lacking virtue. He actually sent a matchmaker to propose marriage. I had my maid splash him with a basin of brush-washing water. "Tell him, this young lady's talent and virtue are reserved for the nation and its people." On the day the results were announced, my father took a tumble right at the entrance of the examination hall. Jiang Yuan, 1st place in the top rank. When I faced the Emperor in the Golden Hall, he stared wide-eyed at my women's attire. I said with righteous confidence, "The law never stated that women are forbidden to take the exam." That slick-haired young master was also on the list, barely scraping by at the bottom. I flashed him a smile. "Brother, your virtue doesn't match your position. You thought this was the beginning of a love story. Wrong." 3 years later, I became the youngest 6th-rank court lecturer, and those who once mocked me had to kneel while listening to my lectures. Marriage proposals flooded my doorstep, so I erected a stone tablet at the entrance. "Those seeking marriage must first defeat me in a policy debate." To this day, no one has succeeded. Just as the inscription on my tablet, "Marriage seekers must pass the policy debate," was nearly polished smooth by matchmakers' constant touching, an unexpected visitor from the Ministry of Rights suddenly arrived. That day, I was organizing ancient texts at the Hanlin Academy when I overheard minor officials whispering outside the window. "The newly appointed Lord Pei has piled the betrothal gifts right at the Jiang residence's entrance." My vermilion ink-dipped brush paused mid-stroke. Pei Shuji, the direct descendant of the Longxi Pei clan, had just been specially promoted to director of the Ministry of Rights. It said that on the day he entered the capital, the rouge shops along Vermilion Bird Street sold out, all their stock crushed by the crowds of young women vying to catch a glimpse of him, Lord Jiang. At this moment, the fellow is leaning against my stone tablet, the fish pouch at his waist swaying with the motion of his swinging leg. In the discourses on salt and iron, how is the equal transportation method explained? His fingertip lightly taps the inscription, "Those who wish to discuss marriage must first win a debate against me." He suddenly speaks, "Lord Jiang's examination question. This humble official dares to answer. You ask why Sang Hongyang insisted on the equal transportation method in the discourses on salt and iron. I narrow my eyes. Answer wrong and you'll get a beating. First, he suddenly straightened his posture. Equal transportation is essentially price stabilization. Transferring tributes from various commanderies and kingdoms to balance supply, exactly as Your Excellency remarked when annotating the Canal Transport Memorial, the wealth of the realm should flow like living water. The vermilion brush in my hand paused slightly. Second, he stepped half a pace forward, the scent of pine ink overpowering the scholarly atmosphere of the courtyard. Sang Hongyang was criticized for competing with merchants for profit. But if equal transportation isn't implemented, should we let the powerful exploit the people? Just like Your Excellency's revised method for dredging the Bien Canal, knowing full well it would offend the old stubborn factions in the Ministry of Works, you still submitted the memorial. I finished his sentence, suddenly realizing this rascal had memorized even my old critiques of the Ministry of Revenue. Third, he directly snatched the vermilion brush from my hair and flamboyantly wrote equal transportation on the back of the stone tablet. The most ingenious part of this method lies in the character, transport. The brushstroke suddenly turned, sketching out a crooked heart, just like this humble official's heart, entirely at Lord Jiang's disposal to command and transfer. Amid the gasps of the minor officials in the courtyard, I snatched back the brush and stabbed it fiercely into his fish pouch. Third rule, 0 points. 3 days later, the entire capital knew two things. Pei Shuji debated equalization and transportation with me at the Hanlin Academy for 6 hours, and in the end, we were both carried out and fed ginseng soup. Before he passed out, he clutched my sleeve tightly and said, "Tomorrow, continue." My father paced back and forth at the entrance of the Imperial Hospital, when a sudden inspiration struck him. Could this kid be? Father, I stuffed a piece of Poria cake into his mouth. Did you also fake fainting like this when you were pursuing Mother? It turns out I underestimated the resilience of this Dr. Pei. He actually climbed over my courtyard wall on his day off, claiming it was to avoid prying eyes. Staring at the crimson official robe stuck on the wall, I finally lost my patience. Lord Pei, are you here to discuss scriptures or to tear down the house, to deliver a betrothal gift? Pei Shuji, stuck on my wall, looked exactly like a fox with its tail caught in a door. My father rushed over at the sound, still holding half a piece of uneaten tuckahoe cake. Lord Jiang, Pei, perched precariously on the wall, struggled to clasp his hands in greeting. This humble official, you're going to die. My father suddenly roared, startling Pei Shuji so much he trembled. This is the century-old wisteria bestowed by the late emperor. He tenderly stroked the bent vine branch, then suddenly turned and yelled at me, "Jiang Yuan, your rotten peach blossom." My mother came trotting over, holding up her skirt, her sewing basket still tangled with half-embroidered mandarin ducks, if those two crooked-necked ducks could even be called mandarin ducks. "Don't worry, sir." My mother stood on tiptoe and poked Pei Shuji's dangling official boots. "This child has strong waist and leg strength, perfect for climbing the pear tree in our backyard." A quarter of an hour later, Pei Shuji sat upright in our flower hall, a few wisteria leaves still clinging to his official robe. My father sternly pushed a plate of pastries toward him. "Try some, Lord Pei." Poria cake. I watched helplessly as Pei Shuji took a bite. The pastry was filled with 2 liang of coptis powder. Uncle's cooking skills are unique. He forced himself to swallow it, his Adam's apple bobbing as if he were gulping down a hot iron. Naturally, my father stroked his beard and sneered, "Back in the day, this was how he tested whether her mother truly loved him." My mother suddenly exclaimed "Aya," as the embroidery needle in her hand accidentally pricked Pei Shuji's sleeve. "Look at me, so distracted by the fabric of Lord Pei's robe it looks like last year's tribute silk from Suzhou." Pei Shuji's pupils contracted sharply. This fabric was originally meant to be entirely gifted to the Minister of Revenue's household, but he intercepted 2 bolts by keeping watch at the dyeing workshop overnight. During the evening meal, my father began the second round of questioning. "I heard Minister Pei was in charge of flood control in Jiangnan 3 years ago. He scooped a spoonful of tofu soup. Coincidentally, our Yuana wrote a piece titled 10 Strategies for Flood Control at that time. It was thrown into the latrine by those old stubborn officials at the Ministry of Works, Pei Shuji suddenly interjected, pulling out an exquisitely bound booklet from his sleeve. I retrieved it and had it recopied. I snatched it away and saw that the crude remark I had once made about the Ministry of Works, dumb as a pufferfish, was now set against a golden-ruled background, with a note added, not harsh enough. My mother suddenly pushed the braised pork knuckle toward him. Eat more. Look how thin the child is. When the moon rose above the willow branches. Pei Shuji was finally allowed to escort me back to my chamber. If trailing behind me carrying a ladder could be considered an escort, can you tell me now? I kicked the ladder. Why must you marry me and no one else? You used to look out for me when we were kids, at Shinyu bookstore, remember? I suddenly recalled the boy in blue who handed me pastries. Wait, I grabbed his collar. Was it you who gave me that rose pastry that ruined my teeth? Under the moonlight, he laughed heartily. Memories suddenly flooded back like a tide. That year I was 12, disguised as a boy browsing storybooks at the Shinyu bookshop. Suddenly, I heard sounds of beating and scolding from the backyard. Peeking through the door crack, I saw a young man in a blue robe pinned to the ground by several spoiled brats, still clutching tightly to a copy of * commentary on the water classic *. Where did this pauper come from, thinking his worthy of reading the Xie family's collection? The leading fatso was grinding his fingers under his shoe sole. I immediately kicked the door open and grabbed the door bolt. Gentlemen, do you know who's protecting this bookstore? The fat man turned and saw the Jiang family jade pendant at my waist, his face instantly turning pale. I seized the chance to slam the inkstone into his face. Get out, if I see you bullying scholars again. Or what? The fat man howled, covering his face. I grinned. I'll let you finish reciting the Book of Rites before you leave. After the crowd scattered like birds and beasts, the youth remained kneeling in the pile of torn paper. Dazed, I crouched down to help him gather the pages and suddenly discovered a water control diagram tucked in the book. The brushwork was yet precise, depicting the flow of water veins so vividly that even my father couldn't have drawn it that way. Hey, I poked his forehead, want to control the waters. The tips of his ears instantly flushed red. Quite the ambition you have. Got anything to eat? He casually handed me a piece of rose pastry. Here, it's very sweet. It really was sweet, so sweet it gave me cavities, and my teeth ached for a long time. After that, I often sneaked off to the bookstore to find him. He always sat in the corner copying ancient texts, while I drew turtles beside him. Once, as I was adding a beard to Confucius in the * Analects *, I suddenly heard him ask, "Young Master Jiang, why do you always come here?" "Because you're handsome," I blurted out casually, only to see his neck flush bright red, his brush tip leaving a blotchy ink stain on the paper. Before I left that day, this fool chased after me and pressed a warm jade token into my palm, a rough piece of Shoyan jade carved with a crooked shoe character. I carved it, he stammered, when I can control the floods, but before he could finish, I was dragged away by the ear by the nanny sent from the mansion to find me. Under the moonlight, Pei Shuji, now a secretary in the Ministry of Rites, took out that jade token from his bosom, its edges long worn smooth and glossy from constant handling. Back then, you said, his Adam's apple bobbed, you'd only marry someone who could keep you in check. I suddenly remembered the bold words I had spoken at 13, and in that moment, my foot slipped. Pei Shuji hurried to catch me. But we both ended up tumbling into the wisteria trellis, so, I grabbed his loosened collar. You worked so hard to pass the imperial exams, to control the floods, and secretly passed you many memorials. He suddenly chuckled, his nose brushing against my earlobe, each time you marked them with vermilion ink. Utter nonsense. I was about to curse when I heard my father's cough from the base of the wall. If you want to be intimate, go inside. This wisteria was planted by the late emperor. I know. I grabbed the jade pendant and threw it toward the source of the voice. Century-old wisteria, right. The very next day after Pei Shuji and I tumbled beneath the wisteria trellis, the capital was suddenly abuzz. The heir of the northern garrison Marquis had returned to the city. Yuan, the familiar loud voice made the parasol tree in my courtyard tremble. A figure in red robes vaulted over the wall and landed steadily before me. silver bells jingling at his waist. Did you miss me? I stared at that sun-tanned yet still handsome face, and the teacup in my hand clattered to the ground. Xie Xiaodao, Xie Lang, courtesy name Minka, earned the nickname Xie Xiaodao from me because he could shoot down willow leaves 100 paces away with a small knife at the age of 12. His father, the Marquis of Zhunbei, and my father are sworn brothers. And we've been close friends since we were toddlers. I heard you erected a marriage proposal steely. He casually grabbed the pastries on my desk and took a bite. Perfect timing. I learned a new sword technique in the northern desert. Before the words faded, the courtyard gate suddenly swung open. Pei Shuji stood at the doorway holding a food box, his gaze fixed on Xielang's hand resting on my shoulder. The air instantly solidified. And this is... Pei Shuji leisurely set down the food box. My brother. I slapped Xielang's paw away. Xielang, who just returned after eating sand in the northern desert for 3 years. Xielang suddenly leaned close to my ear. Is this the bookworm who debated scriptures with you until he passed out? His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for the entire room to hear. Pei Shuji smiled faintly and took out a bowl of crystal sugar and snow pear soup from the food box. Official Jiang has been coughing recently. This humble official specially. She hates eating pears the most. Xielang suddenly interrupted, magically pulling out an oil paper package. Here, dried beef from the northern desert, your favorite. My father, never one to miss a chance for drama, insisted on hosting a banquet that evening with all 3 of us at the same table. Ming Ku has achieved military merits in Morbei. My father served Xielang a piece of roasted lamb, upon returning this time. He is to be promoted to Commandant of the Imperial Guards. Pei Shuji suddenly gave a light cough. What a coincidence. Next month the military supply report for the Imperial Guards will be reviewed by the Ministry of Rights. Lord Pei, Xielang grinned, revealing 2 canine teeth. I heard that last time at the archery range. You missed the target with 3 arrows. My mother fiercely stomped on my father's foot under the table, and my father suppressed his laughter until his beard trembled. After the banquet, Xielang insisted on escorting me back to my room, while Pei Shuji silently followed 3 steps behind, carrying a lantern. Yuan Yuan, Xielang suddenly lowered his voice. That guy's gaze toward you is unsettling. I know, you know, and yet you still let him. Xielang scratched his head anxiously, looking just like a bristling monkey. When we were kids, you said you'd marry the greatest swordsman in the world. I glanced at the new sword at his waist. So you're now the best in the world. He immediately deflated. Not quite yet. The next morning, I opened the window and was met with a suffocating scene. Pei Shuji had spread out scrolls on the stone table in the courtyard, while Xielang crouched on the wall, playing with his small knife. Both looked up simultaneously. Yuan Yuan, Minister Jiang, what would you like for breakfast? I slammed the window shut. This is no way to live. The autumn sunlight had yet to pierce the morning fog. But the beacon fires at the border had already dyed half the sky crimson. I was proofreading military documents at the Hanlin Academy when the sound of hooves clattering on the bluestone pavement came from outside the window. A minor official stumbled in. Your Excellency, Juyong Pass, has fallen. I grabbed my official hat and rushed outside, running into Xielang in full armor at the palace gate. Bloodstains still marked his armor. The Northern Di Khan personally leads 100,000 cavalry. The wound on his split tiger's mouth was still bleeding. Yuan Yuan, the world is truly about to change. The snow in the northern frontier had been falling for 3 full months, and the 2 armies remained deadlocked outside Yangmen Pass. Xielang's black armor core was wedged like a nail at the mouth of the canyon. No matter how fiercely the northern Di cavalry charged, they could not advance a single step further. Each day, I calculated the provisions in the military tent, and the sand table on my desk had long been worn into grooves by my fingers. On the night of the 8th day of the 12th lunar month, Pei Shuji braved the wind and snow to infiltrate the enemy camp, returning with his cloak crusted in icicles. He pulled a letter from his breast. The Khan's younger brother is willing to negotiate peace. On the eve of the peace talks, the 3 of us gathered in the command tent under a dying lamp. Xielang thrust a dagger into the sheepskin map. I've scouted the location of the Khan's golden tent that the brat wants. With a flick of his wrist, the blade tip hooked a blood-stained token. and I took out 2 of their 1,000-man commanders along the way. Pei Shuji leisurely brewed tea. 3 of the 7 northern Di tribes have already pledged allegiance. He pulled a scroll of names from the bottom of the tea canister. These noble youths have all studied at the Imperial Academy in Chang'an. I added a handful of pine branches to the charcoal brazier. Tomorrow's peace talks, they must seed the Blackwater River. As the north wind swept snowflakes against the camp gate, the northern Di envoy group finally appeared. At their head was a youth draped in fox fur. The negotiations lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The final treaty that was signed left the entire court in an uproar. Not only did the northern Di retreat beyond the Juyong Pass, but they also opened up the grasslands south of the Yin Mountains. At the victory banquet, His Majesty asked me what reward I wanted. I looked at the 2 people below the dais, both equally scarred and battered. I request to revise the commentary on the water classic. I raised my bandaged hand. This time I must clearly map the waterways from the Blackwater River to Yangmen Pass. Xielang coughed desperately in the military official's line, while Pei Shuji lowered his gaze to conceal a smile. 3 days after the victory banquet, an unexpected guest arrived in the capital. I was in the mansion tracing new river routes for the commentary on the water classic when I suddenly heard a silvery laughter from the front courtyard. Sister Jiang, long time no see Tilda. Looking up, I saw a girl in an apricot-red ruchuan rushing toward me, nearly knocking over my inkstone. Lin, Ru. I grabbed her by the cheeks. Why aren't you being a talented lady in Jiangnan? What brings you to the capital? This Miss Lin was exactly the child of another family that my father used to talk about every day. Who would have thought that while she appeared to be a talented lady skilled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, behind the scenes she was my accomplice in secretly reading storybooks? I heard Sister Jiang is getting married. She blinked her big eyes and peeked into my study. I specially brought 20 newly published romance novels as a gift. Before the words faded, Pei Shuji and Xielang simultaneously poked their heads in through the window. Lin Ruru let out an ayah as the book The Domineering Minister Falls for Me smacked right onto Xielang's face. Things began to take a bizarre turn. Lin Ruru insisted on hosting a poetry gathering at the Jiang residence. But all the attendees turned out to be eligible noble ladies. I watched helplessly as she cornered Pei Shuji in the corridor. Lord Pei, in the Book of Songs, having seen the gentleman, what comes next? Before Pei Shuji could answer, Xielang suddenly dropped down upside down from the roof. Why not be delighted? So simple, and you still ask, scaring Lin Ruru so much she threw her round fan into the lotus pond. To make matters worse, the girl somehow got involved with that greasy-haired young master I once pelted with peanut shells. Now he is the Vice Minister of Works, taking Lin Ruru to Zhuqiu Street every day to coincidentally run into me. Minister Zhu said Sister Jiang was quite fierce when she was little. Lin Ruru clung to that good-for-nothing's arm. I don't believe it. Sister is clearly the gentlest. Her affected tone gave me goosebumps all over. The situation reached its climax on Laba Festival. Lin Ruru insisted on giving the 3 of us hand-embroidered sachets. The one for me was embroidered with 100 years of harmony, the one for Pei Shuji was May you have a son soon, and the one for Xielang was actually intimate friend in the boudoir. Oh, Ruru, I affectionately put my arm around her shoulder. Do you know why the well in my courtyard was sealed? She shook her head innocently. Last year, a matchmaker fell in, I whispered gently, and no one has fished her out yet. That night, I climbed over the wall into the Lin residence with 2 jars of pear blossom white wine. Lin Ruru was lying on the bed reading a storybook, and her eyes lit up when she saw me. Sister, come teach me about the wedding night. Shut up. I thumped the wine jars onto the table. Whose side are you on, anyway? She suddenly and mysteriously pulled out a sketchbook from under her pillow. 100 ways to use a supporting female character to provoke the male lead into confessing. Don't worry, she leaned in to whisper, Minister Zhu is just a prop I hired. Lord Pei has a small statue of you hidden in his study. I spat out a mouthful of wine onto her priceless Suzhou embroidery quilt cover. Lin Ruru frantically tried to save her Suzhou embroidery quilt cover when an object suddenly fell from her sleeve. It was the hilt of Xielang's ruby-encrusted dagger. Wait, I grabbed her wrist firmly. This isn't the one Xie Xiaodao always carries. Her ear tips instantly flushed crimson, and she jerked her hand back. I found it. Oh, I narrowed my eyes. Then why is your signature double loop not tied to the scabbard? After 3 cups of pear blossom white, the truth finally surfaced. When I was 12, he taught me archery. Lin Ruru hugged the wine jar and gulped it down, and I ended up shooting through his belt. I almost choked on the wine. So that scar on his waist, it was my fault he fell into the thorn bushes. She suddenly threw herself onto my shoulder and burst into tears. But every time he returns to the capital, he still comes to see you first. The next morning, when Xielang came to deliver the military report, I deliberately kept Lin Ruru in the study. Yuan, he didn't even glance at Lin Ruru, handing the secret letter directly to me. The Northern DI are making unusual moves. Lin Ruru twisted her handkerchief and approached. General Xie, this is a newly embroidered quiver I made. Xielang casually took it and hung it at his waist, but his eyes were fixed on the commentary on the water classic on my desk. Did Pei Shuji come to discuss the classics with you again yesterday? Lin Ruru tossed her handkerchief every day on the path Xielang had to take, and Xielang picked it up each time only to hand it over to me for wiping cinnabar ink. The Mandarin duck sword tassel she sent was tied by Xielang onto the dagger he gave me. Even the pouch she meticulously prepared was taken apart by Xielang and remade into a seal case for me. Brother Minka, one day, Lin Ruru finally couldn't hold back and stopped him at the training ground. You clearly know my feelings. Xielang was polishing the new dagger he intended to give me, not even looking up. Don't make a fuss. On the night of the Lantern Festival, Lin Ruru, drunk, stumbled into my arms. Sister Jiang, when he looks at you, there are stars in his eyes. I patted her back, but when I looked up, I saw Xielang standing under the corridor. He held the lantern he had bought for me in his hand, yet his gaze fell on Lin Ruru, whose makeup was smeared from crying, and a complexity I had never seen before flickered in his eyes. Yuan, he suddenly walked over, shoved the lantern into my hand. Pei Shuji is looking for you. 3 days later, Xielang set out for the northern deserts. Lin Ruru hid behind the battlements, not daring to see him off. Only when the army began to march did she rush out and shove a bundle into his arms. It's all from Sister Jiang. She asked me to give it to you. Xielang opened it. Inside were nothing but protective talismans. The military report from the northern deserts arrived on a rainy night. I was checking the revisions of the asterisk commentary on the water classic asterisk with Pei Shuji when the sudden clatter of armor echoed from outside the door. A blood-soaked messenger stumbled in. A blood-stained letter falling to the ground with a slap. General Xie has been ambushed and captured. The Northern DI demand Lord Jiang to personally go to the Blackwater River within 3 days for the exchange. Pei Shuji's teacup shattered on the desk. Impossible. He grabbed the blood-stained letter, about to tear it. I will immediately request an imperial decree to send troops. Wait. I pressed his hand down, turning to the messenger soldier. What else did the Northern DI say? The soldier tremblingly handed over a blood-stained piece of jade, with a line of small characters newly carved on the back. Yuan, don't come. My father knelt in the ancestral hall all night. Your grandmother made me swear on her deathbed. He caressed my grandmother's memorial tablet. To never let Yuan follow in her footsteps, I silently placed a jar of pear blossom wine beside him, the very kind my grandmother loved most in life. On the day of departure, Vermilion Bird Street was packed with people. Pei Shuji stopped in front of my carriage, the outline of soft armor faintly visible beneath his official robes. I'm going with you. No. I shoved the commentary on the Waterways Classic into his arms. With my newly marked Northern DI Waterways, only you can decipher it. He suddenly untied the fish pouch from his waist. Then take this. Inside the pouch were hidden thunderclap fire pearls. The wind by the Black River was like a knife. The Northern DI Khan sat solemnly before the golden tent, while Xielang was chained to the sacrificial pillar. Lord Jiang is truly a man of loyalty and sentiment. The Khan toyed with my jade pendant. Why not stay and become my consort? I kicked over the wine table. Release him. What's the hurry? He suddenly clapped his hands. First, meet an old acquaintance. A familiar figure emerged from behind the tent. It was the director of the Imperial Academy whom I had once drawn a turtle on. The old man flatteringly presented a scroll. Lord Jiang, the turtle you drew on the Analects back then, I've made a rubbing of it. So it was this scoundrel's doing. Xielang's misfortune is most likely connected to him. I'll remember this grudge. What a refined interest you have, Chief Libationer. I let out a cold laugh, my fingers secretly gripping the thunderclap fire bead in my fish pouch. You came all the way to the northern desert just to show me this. The old Libationer's wrinkled face broke into an obsequious smile. This old man simply couldn't bear to see Lord Jiang's talents go unappreciated. Bullshit, Xialang suddenly roared, his chains clanking loudly. This old dog has long been colluding with the Northern DI. Last month's military grain robbery was him. Khan struck Xialang on the shoulder with his whip, cutting his words short. But it was enough. I stared at the swaying Ministry of Revenue token at the old sacrificial wine's waist. There truly was a traitor in the court. Yuan, Xialang suddenly lowered his voice. When I break these chains, grab a horse and ride southeast. Shut up. Using the motion of giving him water, I slipped the thunderfire bead into his blood-stained bandage. Where is the protective charm Lin Ruru gave you? His pupils constricted sharply. How do you know, having faced life and death? You should see your own heart clearly now. She is still waiting for you. Go back, uncover the traitors in the court. Leave this side to me. Don't worry, the Khan impatiently tapped his golden knife. Have you made your decision? No. Xialang struggled violently against the iron chains, his wrists rubbed raw and bleeding. If I leave, this is a military order. I looked straight into his eyes. My voice lowered to a whisper. There are traitors in the court. Someone must go back to deliver the message. I quietly slipped his dagger back into his sleeve. The Black Armor Army cannot be without its commander. I must personally witness General Xie taking the antidote. I deliberately raised my voice. The Khan laughed loudly. Good, as you wish. As Xielang's horse hooves shattered the thin frost on the palace gate, the first light of dawn was just breaking on the horizon. Report. He knelt on one knee before the Taiji Hall, blood-tinged ice chips falling from his armor. Minister Jiang used himself as a hostage to allow me to return with this message. The Emperor's vermilion brush paused, dragging a long red streak across the memorial. Speak. Xialang presented the matter in detail. The Emperor remained silent for a long while after listening. Issue the decree. His voice was like tempered ice, effective immediately. Officials of the 6 ministries are forbidden to leave the capital without my handwritten edict. In the main hall of the Jiang residence, my father stood in silence for a long time after hearing the military report. Suddenly, he turned and drew the bronze sword enshrined in the ancestral hall, its blade scraping an ear-piercing sound against the bluestone floor. Master, the steward exclaimed, this was bestowed by the Emperor. If I can bear to part with my daughter's life, how could I cling to a mere sword? With a flick of his wrist, he pointed the sword tip toward the northern frontier. Go, dispatch all 300 of our household troops to Xialang. My mother said nothing, silently opening her jewelry box and taking out the land deeds that were part of her dowry. Sell these to fund the military supplies. In the Hanlin Academy duty room, after hearing Xialang's report, Pei Shuji's teacup cracked with a sharp sound. Thank you, General Xie. His voice was terrifyingly calm as he pulled out a scroll of a map from under the desk. The undercurrents of the Blackwater River have been fully marked. On the unfolded parchment, the vermilion-drawn attack route pointed unmistakably toward the Khan's golden tent. This was no waterway map, but clearly a battle plan. 3 days later, during the morning court session, while Minister Ju was still droning on about the exhaustion of a distant campaign, the sound of clanking armor echoed uniformly from outside the hall. Pei Shuji stepped forward holding the petition. I request to join the battle. By the Blackwater River, inside the cage, I count the snowflakes drifting through the gaps in the bars. Look, Lord Jiang, the guard pokes my cage with a spear. Another general of your great Ju has come to die. The Northern DI people dragged another corpse and threw it before the cage. This was their new method of torture, making me identify the remains of every great Ju soldier. This war has been going on for almost a year. I wonder how my parents are doing now, and Pei Shuji and Xialang too. No news might just be the best news. When the Northern DI people sprinkled salt on my wounds, the pain left me utterly weak. On such a cold day, cold sweat kept pouring out. The blood of the talented woman of Great Jew is also salty. It turns out, the Khan's personal guard used a curved knife to lift my hair. Sticky with flesh and blood, I wonder if Lord Jiang's bones can endure the winter of the northern desert. The distant sound of war horses neighing. They dragged another corpse and threw it onto the snow. I had long since grown numb. The northern DI people locked me in an iron cage, so narrow I could only curl up at night. The wind was like a knife, cutting gashes on my face, the scabs forming and breaking again. The guard only gave half a bowl of spoiled porridge each day, mixed with sand that crunched when chewed. One day, there was a piece of meaty bone in the porridge. I bit into it and found it was a human knuckle. At first, I would break down, vomit, and cry, but later, all that remained was numbness. On the 23rd day of the 12th lunar month, the day of the kitchen god festival, I broke my little finger to free myself from the shackles when I heard a familiar cough outside the tent. Xielang's signal. The snow was falling heavily. The northern DI people suddenly grew restless, torches flickered wildly, and the thundering of hooves shook the ground. I heard someone cursing in Mandarin. It was one of the old veterans of the Black Armor Army. An arrow clinked as it struck the cage, a cloth strip tied to its shaft reading, "Get down." I had just crouched low when the blast shockwave overturned the cage. The iron bars warped and cracked open a gap, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Bodies lay scattered haphazardly across the snow. A northern barbarian soldier, not yet fully dead, was dragging his entrails behind him as he crawled, plowing a dark red furrow in the snow. I picked up his curved blade, only to be suddenly grabbed from behind by the neck. It was that orderly who always rubbed salt in my wounds. His breath reeked of alcohol. Lord Jiang, trying to run away, just as the tip of his blade plunged into my shoulder. Xielang's spearhead burst through his temple, red and white pulp splattered all over my face. The golden tent caught fire, with flames licking at the parchment ashes as they soared into the sky. Pei Shuji rushed out from the flames, the hem of his official robe on fire. He was holding a box in his arms, its corner still dripping with blood, account books. He coughed as he shoved them into my hands, evidence of the old Chancellor's collusion with the enemy. Lin Ruru suddenly screamed, "Watch out!" The Khan's golden blade came slashing down, and Pei Shuji pushed me aside. The blade hacked into his shoulder, the sound of it lodging in bone like splitting firewood. Xialang knocked the Khan off his horse with a spear, the shaft snapping with a sharp crack. Lin Ruru lunged forward to deliver the finishing blow, but her dagger missed its mark. The Khan grabbed her by the hair and shoved her toward the fire. With no time to wonder how she'd ended up here, I snatched up a burning log and swung it at him. Amid the stench of scorched flesh, the Khan howled, clutching his face. Pei Shuji pulled the knife from his shoulder and plunged it into the man's heart, twisting it halfway. "Go." Xialang spat blood-flecked foam. "The river is about to thaw." As we crossed the thin ice, the torches of the pursuers glowed like wolves' eyes. Lin Ruru slipped and fell into an ice hole. Xialang grabbed her, and the ice cracked with a sharp crack. I dropped down to grab his wrist, while Pei Shuji pinned my legs. Xialang's nails dug into my flesh. "Let go, or we'll all die." In the end, it was Lin Ruru who bit him, and he loosened his grip in pain, allowing the two of us to pull them up. We were all panting heavily, filled with the relief of having narrowly escaped death. The torches on the opposite bank of the glacier gradually faded into the distance, and we collapsed in the snow, gasping for breath. Lin Ruru's hair had been singed by the fire, and only now did she remember the pain, grimacing as she pressed snow onto the wound. "What are you doing here?" I tore a piece of my clothing to bandage her. "Is this a place for a young lady?" She suddenly let out a scoff, laughing until she coughed up bloody foam. "Sister Jiang, do you still think the capital is the same as it used to be?" The snow pellets stung sharply against the face. It hadn't rained for 3 months. Lin Ruru counted on her frozen fingers. The Wei River had run dry, yet the Ministry of Rights was still raising funds to build some useless rain-praying platform. She grabbed my wrist excitedly. That incompetent Vice Minister Zhu converted the disaster relief grain into green sprout loans. Pei Shuji suddenly broke into a violent cough. Flecks of blood spattering onto the snow. I patted his back gently. He was so thin that I could feel his bones poking through his clothes. Looking at the other two, They had also lost weight. By daybreak, we stumbled upon an abandoned beacon tower. Pei Shuji was delirious with fever, insisting that he could hear my father scolding someone. In the capital now, my throat felt bitter. My parents, Lin Ruru, suddenly shoved something into my hand. It was a piece of porridge cake. Already crumbled to bits. Auntie asked me to tell you. She broke the cake open, revealing a golden melon seed hidden inside. They're doing well, and you don't need to worry. I laughed and laughed until my eyes grew blurry. I miss my parents. It began to snow again outside the beacon tower. Pei Shuji, in his delirium, clutched my sleeve, muttering something about diverting the canal route. Lin Ruru, wrapped in Xielang's tattered cloak, had fallen asleep. Still clutching that notched dagger in her arms, I gazed toward the capital and suddenly remembered the words Pei Shuji had spoken many years ago at the Shinyu bookstore. When I can control the floods, the snow fell without a sound. Pei Shuji suddenly opened his eyes. Those eyes that always held a smile were now frighteningly bright, like two will-o'-the-wisps burning within them. He leaned against the wall and slowly stood up. The blood-stained hem of his official robe sweeping over the snow on the ground. 3 days. His voice was so hoarse it was barely recognizable, yet it carried the sharpness of a drawn blade. Xielang, how many black armor troops can you still mobilize? Xielang paused for a moment, including the wounded and disabled. Fewer than 800. Enough. Pei Shuji pulled out a blood-stained map from his chest. 30 miles upstream of the Blackwater River. There's an abandoned military settlement. The water diversion canal built by the previous dynasty is still there. He pointed at several vermilion lines on the map with his fingertip. Blast open the ice layer from here. Lin Ruru suddenly gasped sharply. Are you planning to flood the northern DI camp? No. Pei Shuji coughed and laughed. I'm going to send water to the Wei River. He unfolded another yellowed blueprint, densely marked with granaries from various locations. All these years, he had been secretly remapping the waterways of the Great Jew. The northern DI occupy the Blackwater River for the salt wells. He traced his finger over the blueprint. But this underground river leads directly to a tributary of the Wei River. He looked up at me. Jiang Yuan, do you remember the memorial on water transport you approved? I nodded blankly. 3 days later, the northern DI discovered the river had suddenly swollen. It was no ordinary
A bloody mess. Xielang planted his spear on the ground and, dragging his broken leg, stood up again. Come on, you bastards. With the provisions burned, the rebels indeed stopped their pursuit and quickly retreated. Before the smoke had cleared, I stumbled toward my parents. My father leaned against the base of the city wall, his old armor soaked in blood, yet he was still smiling. Yuan, I didn't disgrace you, did I? I pressed down hard on the wound in his abdomen, shaking my head, but blood still gushed out between my fingers. My mother leaned against his shoulder, the kitchen knife still clutched in her hand, but she no longer had the strength to lift it. Daughter, she pointed weakly at her lapel, and with trembling hands, I pulled out half a piece of porridge cake. Xielang dragged himself over on his broken leg, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. Lin Ruru followed behind him. Her hands mangled and bloody, yet she clung to him desperately. Uncle, Aunt. Xielang's voice was hoarse and broken. I'll carry you into the city. My father shook his head, suddenly grabbing Pei Shuji's hand. You brat, you promised to protect Yuan. Pei Shuji knelt on the ground. The arrow wound on his shoulder, still oozing blood. This son-in-law would die 10,000 deaths without regret. My mother gently touched my face one last time. Silly girl, don't cry. Your father and I will go ahead to prepare your new home. Their hands gradually grew cold, yet they remained tightly clasped together, holding them. I suddenly remembered my childhood, my father teaching me to ride a horse, my mother watching anxiously from the doorway. Those were such good times. Even being scolded felt sweet. The sugar cake melted in the rain, and no one would ever hide golden melon seeds for me again. Pei Shuji's body twitched, and I hurried over to check on him. Listen, he said, I might. Blood gushed out of his mouth in streams. I shook my head frantically, but he suddenly smiled. Many years ago at Shinyu bookstore, he smiled the same way when he gave me rose pastries, with a small dimple at the corner of his mouth. Jiang Yuan, he gently touched the scar on my face one last time. May you live a long life. Don't I let out a desperate plea, begging the heavens to open their eyes and let them live. Still breathing, Xielang dragged his broken leg over. Pressing his blood-stained fingers firmly against Pei Shuji's neck, This bookworm is tough as nails. It was only when Xielang spoke up that I realized Pei Shuji had merely passed out. Only then did I notice the arrow wound on Pei Shuji's chest had turned black. It was poisoned. Lin Ruru suddenly tore off the sachet from her waist, pouring out a few pills. Quick! These are detox pills given by the imperial physician. Only a few left. He pushed the pill into Pei Shuji's mouth. But he couldn't swallow it no matter what. Trembling, I took a sip of water, leaned over, and passed it to him. The taste of blood filled my lips and teeth, mixed with the saltiness of rain and tears. As the city gates slowly opened, I saw all the citizens kneeling in the rain. Someone handed over a clean cloth, someone brought hot soup, and others silently helped us lift the wooden planks. No one spoke, only the sound of rain and the footsteps of a few of us could be heard. When we reached the entrance of the Jiang residence, I saw that wisteria vine. The flowers were in full bloom, and the raindrops falling on the petals made it seem as if the heavens were weeping. Pei Shuji's injury took 3 months to heal, during which he insisted on helping Xielang make a crutch, and the two nearly ended up fighting. Lin Ruru ran to Xielang's room every day, claiming to care for the injured, but actually trying to sneak sips of his medicinal wine, and I have finally learned to say with a smile before the graves, "Father, Mother, I am doing well, it's just that whenever it rains, the old wound on my shoulder still aches." In the 3rd year after the Battle of Blackwater River, the new commentary on the Waterways Classic that I led the revision of was promulgated throughout the land. The old stubborn officials from the Ministry of Works knelt in protest before the Taiji Hall. How can a woman decide state policies? I unfolded the river defense map in court. Do you gentlemen recognize these 36 hidden currents? The entire court fell silent. Those were what I had carved on the iron bars with my fingernails while in a cage. I have established a women's policy debate course at the Imperial Academy. Minister Ju, who once said of me, "Lack of talent is a virtue," now has to grade assignments for the female students. Lin Ruru brought her child to the lecture, and the little rascal wet half of the *Analects*. Xielang was so frantic he wanted to spank him, but I handed over the old book I once drew turtles in. No matter, Confucius just needs a football at his waist. The day I submitted my resignation, the entire court was in an uproar. "Are you truly leaving, Minister Jiang?" The young emperor crumpled the memorial in his hand. "I grant you entry into the Grand Secretariat as Chancellor." For the last time I stood in the Golden Yuan Hall, gazing at the sea of new faces, those old ministers who once accused me of a hen crowing like a rooster at daybreak, their graves now overgrown with several cycles of weeds. "Your Majesty, the new canal tax has been implemented for 3 years, doubling the annual state revenue." I unfurled my final memorial. "The war horses submitted through this year's northern border trade are sufficient to form a light cavalry unit." Jiang Yuan, the lecturer, Pei Shuji, the director of the Ministry of Rights, and Xielang, the general of the palace guards, resigned on the same day, and the emperor had no choice but to grant their requests. I never expected that they would resign as well, but it's just as well. The few of us had long been inseparable, more like family than friends. We settled down in the Jiangnan water town. Pei Shuji has taken on a fish pond, Xielang trains ducks using military drills, and my biggest daily worry is Lin Ruru hiding my cinnabar brush again. She always wants to grade the children's essays for me. There's no helping it, I can be a bit too strict at times. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, we drifted on the lake in a boat. In the distance, the county town was brightly lit, and the newly built canal was transporting wine from the northern frontier. "Look," Xielang pointed into the distance, where thousands of river lanterns drifted downstream, a ritual performed by water conservancy departments across the land to honor the river god. In the flickering lantern light, I seemed to see my father and mother standing atop the stargazing tower, raising their cups in our direction. "Father, Mother, these mountains and rivers remain unharmed, it's just, I miss you a little." Records of the Jinghe era document, since the Jiang clan retreated from public life, the realm has enjoyed peace. The northern border saw no war for a decade, and canal transport profits funded schools across the land. The imperial examination for women became standard practice, and among the people, the legend of Jiang's 3 refutations, refuting admonitions for women, refuting conservatism, and refuting divine fate, spread far and wide. No one ever saw that top female prodigal of the capital again, yet in which young lady's vanity case wasn't her portrait secretly hidden. Over tea and after meals, they loved to imitate Lady Jiang's manner, slamming the admonitions for women face down on the table, hands on hips, saying, "Ignorance is a virtue in women." Bullshit, end.